faces, but I want you to bear with me for just a moment. Okay. What were the thoughts and feelings that you had automatically following that statement? They were most likely either A, you thought about things that you weren't good at and left with a really heavy feeling inside of yourself, or B, you said, screw that, I am too. Either way, you placed an automatic judgment on yourself or me for making you say it or think it. The fact is that most of us do this at some point in our lives. We either say things like, why can't I get better grades? Or, why can't I lose that weight? Or, why is everyone so much better looking than I am? What we're really saying is that we aren't enough. See, as adults, we place automatic judgment on everything based on our thoughts, feelings, and circumstances. There isn't anything wrong with this unless there is some critical thinking around it. Is it even true? See, as children, we don't do this. As children, we believe that anything is possible, right? We take our passion and our curiosity and it results in an action. From finger painting the walls to making the best blanket fort ever, we're optimistic and want to take on the world. A great example of this is there's a YouTube video that Nabob turned into a coffee commercial. It's called Jessica's Affirmations. If you haven't seen it, it's this cute little girl with curly blonde hair. She's in the bathroom, standing on the counter, looking at herself in the mirror. And it goes something like this. I like my pajamas. I like my house. I like my mom. I like my dad. I can do anything good. Does anybody remember that? There's nothing you can do but smile when you see it. She's positive, optimistic, and knows exactly what she likes. She's looking in the mirror with loving expression. There's no judgment. Then, something in our early adolescence, teens, switches this. There was a spoof done on Jessica's Affirmations of a 20-year-old girl, and she's standing in, is that better? She's standing in the mirror with, in her underpants, looking at herself, and it goes something like this. I hate my life. I hate my parents, I hate my body, I hate my school, I can't do anything right. This illustrates the switch really well. So why does this happen? Well, perhaps it's that our passion and curiosity isn't nurtured, or we are labeled or judged for it. Whatever the case, I've been on a journey in the last, well, actually my whole entire life, but more specifically over the last 5 years, as the executive director and founder of a nonprofit organization called the Passion Foundation, where we work here locally in Vancouver to support the leadership development of girls. And one of the realizations that I had was around self-judgment and how it rears its ugly head in our lives. And on this journey of working with hundreds of women in different parts of the world, because I partner with organizations overseas, I've come to some conclusions around self-judgment. And people say to me all the time, Loretta, what is it exactly that you do with your nonprofit organization? And how do you get the results that you get? Well, I thought the only way to actually tell them and to show it, or to tell you, is actually to show you. So what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to walk you through a journey, a part of my own personal journey to get here, but more specifically the journey that I walk the girls on to discovering a better sense of self. So if you're ready, let's get started. I start off by teaching the girls about the big you and the little you. And it's a good thing that I actually am not here to show you my drawing skills. This is something that I created to teach the girls about the different parts of ourselves. As we grow, we get inundated with judgments, beliefs, and imposed values from outside sources. Parents, government, religion, media, fashion, most of all, cars. Okay. These outside influences tell us who we should be, what we should look like, where we should go to school, what career we should get, and what kind of cars that we should buy. Okay. And these enter into our minds either consciously or subconsciously, and we either believe them or we fight them. Whatever the case, they don't actually belong to us. We then start to place judgment on ourselves. I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not capable enough, I'm just not enough. We fight harder and harder and push things further and further away. At first, we actually get really upset because we know deep down that we are enough, but something happens either because it happens too often, or it hits us at a particular sensitive point of our lives, and we start to believe it and accept it. And then there's the little you. There's a little you that was born into this world, full of passion, curiosity, and imagination, with a need for love and a sense of belonging. What happens is that the big you is stronger than the little you, and then the little you starts to shrink. It starts to believe that things are impossible, and then the bright light starts to fade. I can tell you that throughout my entire life, both professionally and personally, that there isn't a person in my life that I haven't met that can't tell me a time where they felt like they didn't belong, a time where they felt they had no voice, and a time where they felt that they weren't good enough, including myself. See, from the time that I was 12 till I was 20 was a tremendously challenging time in my life. And I did whatever I needed to get my needs met. I was angry with the world, I was angry with my parents, but most of all, I was sad because I thought no one got me. When I was 13, I was using drugs and alcohol to escape. When I was 14, I had serious body image issues. When I was 15, I was deeply depressed and dropped out of school. Then at 16, my boyfriend died of an overdose. You can imagine that that was a real wake-up call for my life, and I started to change things around. I went back to school, I went to work. I started to do the things that normal people do. And I fell in love with my best friend, who was there for me throughout this entire process. And then at 20, him and I broke up within a month of me losing my job and having a mass removed from my breast. So you can imagine that at 20, I was pretty done with life. I was tired of this roller coaster that I was on, and I was sick and tired of going up and down and then not knowing who I was, where I was supposed to be, or what I was supposed to do in this world. So I took my last paycheck from the job that I was just laid off of, and I bought a plane ticket to Italy because I needed to escape. I needed to get away, but most of all, I needed to find out who I was. And the only way for me to do that, I felt, was to connect with my roots. So I grew up with parents who believed a dollar was earned and it wasn't given freely. So with only $100 in my pocket, I had to work and live with family while I was in Italy. And what I started to do was started to actually question who I was and why I had gone through so many things in such a short period of time in my life. But more specifically, I started listening to my instincts, and I started asking myself questions as, who are you? Where are you supposed to go? What do you value the most? And what I found from all these questions was that I started to get really curious about life. I started to explore different things. I started to write again. I started to draw again. And most importantly, I got my passion back. And so when I came home, I decided to go to college for child and youth care counseling, and I started to do things a little bit differently, but this time with a more positive spin. I won't tell you too much more about my journey, but I can tell you that it has unraveled into something extremely beautiful in my life. That when I started to deal with all my pain, all my suffering, all my challenges, and all these beliefs that I had in my head that didn't actually really exist, except that I created them because I believed them, I started to find out what I'm supposed to do in this world. And I figured that if I'd been through so many things, that perhaps I could then offer that back to somebody else. And the more I got curious about what that looked like, and the more I actually started to take chances and started to do things, I came up with some pretty interesting things. And when I was away in Thailand and India in 2006, traveling, I wrote my first book with no real effort. Because the more that I got connected with my passion and my curiosity, the more it resulted into an action. And the more it resulted into an action, the more that I actually started to figure out what it is through trial and error that I needed to do. And so as a result of that, I created the Elements of Success. And Elements of Success is a coaching series where I walk girls through to discover a little bit more about themselves, about community, and how they can actually give that back into the world. And so over the next few minutes, what I'd like to do is I'd actually walk you through that process of the Elements of Success. Now, although I do it in gender specific with young women, this is actually models transferable to just about anybody. So I'd like to encourage you to follow along with me as I go through it. not big enough. Success is an acronym. We start off with self-exploration. The more that I started to discover who I was, the more I started asking questions. And so here's where I asked the girls, who are they? What is most important to them? What do they like? What do they dislike? What values do they have? And how do they see the world? Once they've established these parts, then they draw themselves out. Understanding limitations are self-imposed. It's one thing to acknowledge, but it's another thing to actually do something about it. So here is where I ask the girls, how do you limit yourself? What are the things that stop you from shining? And what we do is we then draw each limitation out on a brick wall. And then I get them to acknowledge that this brick wall is what stands between them and their success. I then ask them to hold on to those bricks for a week. And it's amazing how many won't let me take the papers away from them. And I have to explain to them that I'm not actually removing them and I'm not taking them away. All I'm doing is keeping them safe. This is the process of letting go. Courage. It's one thing to know and it's another thing to do. So once we know that we have these limitations, it takes a certain amount of courage, compassion, and understanding in order to move through it. So here's where I actually ask the girls, what are your limitations and how does it serve you to keep them? What are the consequences? And then I talk to the girls about what would it mean for them to actually remove those limitations from their life? What are the rewards? And it's amazing how many of them start to see the transformation, and what we do then is turn them into affirmations, and then they turn them into questions. How could they better themselves in their lives? We then do a little celebration in order to move it through them, to move them through it. And sometimes it's, actually I was just working with a group of sorority girls from UBC, and they decided to actually together as a community take each limitation, rip them up in little small pieces of paper, throw them on the ground, and light them on fire. Right? Each group has a different way of doing that, and we do it as safe as we possibly can, so nobody's hurt in the process. But the idea of actually tangibly taking an intangible thing and actually removing it can be such a powerful process. Next is cooperation. Now that I know a little bit more about myself and I can bring the best me into any circumstances. So here's where we talk about community. I give the girls the task of being a hero of their own community or island. What does it look like? What are the rules? I then get them to draw themselves out physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Then I get them to imagine, once they've done all this, if you can imagine it, you can be it. And in fact, because you've actually created it, you already are. This is where the really magical moment happens, because you can see the lights go off, that they're owning this space, that they truly are supposed to be in this world. Next is the evaluation of skills. Now that I have a better understanding of me, I have a better understanding of what it means to cooperate and bring the best of me in any circumstance, I then need to look at what skills that I need. So we do an evaluation of skills using a grading wheel, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and socially. And they start to establish what it is that they need. And then what they do is they actually look in their network, who do they have, or who do we have as a group that can support them in order to achieve those skills. Next is obviously the learning of the skills. This is where we take some time to actually learn what it is that they need the most. They've identified it, they own it, they get to receive the information to support them. So they're armed with tools. The next S is service. So it's one thing to do, but it's another one thing to know and it's another thing to do. When we actually do something, we integrate it into our entire being. So this is where I give the girls the task of creating a community initiative or a community project that's meaningful to them. This is where the solidifying of the actual leadership starts to happen. This particular project was done by girls in the Burnaby Youth Custody Center, where the girls identified after the end of their passion project that forgiveness and acceptance were the two most important things to them. Forgiveness of the people that had harmed them up until their point in life that they were now, and asking forgiveness for those who they have harmed, their victims. and acceptance over their bodies. They created 7 figures of women made out of recyclable goods that they found in the prison or that I could bring in. And actually the guards helped out in this process. It was really powerful. And we then took it to UBC Robson Square that year, who donated the space to us for 3 weeks. And we invited the public to come in to actually leave comments for the girls. I then took these and transported them back to the prison so the girls could see the impact that they had on the community without them even being present right then and there. I can tell you so many stories, amazing stories of what girls have come through and what they have created. And it's such a blessing to be part of this. One of the most powerful things, though, is that they learn to start thinking for themselves. They start to become independent. They start to ask for help, to think about their future, their education, their communication, and their relationships. I take solace in knowing that when they're 30 or 40 years of age, they'll most likely not be questioning who they are. They'll actually be living it. Sometimes in life, I still get stuck, and I try to figure out where I am in the world, and old beliefs start to come up, and I remind myself of this quote. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our dark, that frightens us the most. We ask ourselves, who are we to be talented? Who are we to be bright, brilliant, talented, gorgeous, and famous? Actually, who are you not to be? So I'd like to leave you with this. How are you squashing your light and your brilliance in the world? How are you limiting who you are? And what are you willing to do to resurrect your passion, your curiosity, and your imagination? The time is now to act. For without you, your strength and your power, that thing you want to do most in the world may not happen. And if passion was the foundation of everything that you do, anything is possible. Thank you.